If we can take a seat, we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning again. My name is Kevin Burke, and in a way of introducing myself, I'm the newly elected member of District 7, which is the Southwest Louisiana part of the state. Glad to see Dr. Shannon Lafargue here, who is from Calcasieu Parish and is part of my district. Also, we have today two newly elected or appointed members, Ms. Shimon Champagne and Mr. Lance Harris. They are not unfamiliar with this as being both ex-legislators, and so we're lucky to have them here. Also, in the way of introduction, Mr. Ronnie Morris, who is president of Bessie, sitting in the back in the audience. Having looked back at this meeting over the last couple of years in the minutes of these meetings, I've noticed that the chance of all of us agreeing on today's outcome is about as slim as the New Orleans Saints winning back-to-back Super Bowls. But with that, there is a chance, albeit very, very slim. But I just want to say that what we're here is to discuss and to bring up things and to try to come up with what's best for the kids. So with that, I just ask and pray God's guidance and divine inspiration that what we do here today will be what is best for the students, teachers, and all staff that are affected by our deliberations. Amen. So I ask Ms. Shannon to do the roll call.
Mr. Birkin?
Here.
Dr. Brumley?
Here.
Ms. Champagne?
Here.
Mr. Claxton?
Here.
Ms. Conaway?
Here.
Dr. Corville has a proxy. Dr. Neal?
Here.
Mr. Dobby has a proxy. Ms. Shum?
Here.
Senator Edmonds? Not in attendance. Mr. Earn has a proxy. Ms. Blanchard?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Ms. Hughes?
Here.
Mr. Kay?
Here.
Ms. King? Not in attendance. Dr. Lafargue?
Here.
Ms. LaFleur is not in attendance. Dr. Mills? Not in attendance. Ms. Griffin Monica?
Present.
Dr. Polito?
Here.
Dr. Pope? Ms. Posey?
Here.
Dr. Procopio?
Here.
Ms. Romer?
Here.
Representative Schlegel? Ms. Sharai? Dr. Baker? Ms. Bujol? Dr. Riley?
Present.
Ms. Whitney?
Here.
Ms. Mills has a policy, which is Thomas. Mr. Thomas is present.
Shane, I'm here. I'm sorry, I didn't speak up in the
I heard you.
We have a quorum.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to item number 2 on the agenda, consideration of an overview of the minimum foundation program. Being that all of us are, most of us, a lot of us are new to this, we thought it might be a good idea just to have a brief review of the MFP and what was the MFP formula for last year. So, Ms. Beth?
Good morning. You should each have 2 handouts. One is going to be a slide deck, a quick review of the formula. And then the second is a 1-pager that will give us just a real visual picture of where we were in 22-23 through the 23-24 year. So with that, we'll start the presentation. First of all, the current House concurrent resolution is 23. It has 4 levels, and each of the levels of the formula are representative of a mechanism to actually distribute the funds in a certain fashion. This includes funds for all schools and school systems currently. It includes not only the city parish traditional school districts, but the type 2 charter schools, both those that are legacy and that are new, we call them. It includes lab schools, state schools, and the RSD. The first level the purpose of that is to determine the state and local share of the cost. The level 2 is actually a reward for effort that the local school systems, school districts make in raising their local revenue. Level 3 is student-driven programs, and then level 4 is supplementary program allocations, and we'll quickly review each of those. This is where we start the formula. Level 1 is the primary mechanism to allocate state funds. It distributes about 2/3 of the $4 billion that we currently go out. This is what we call the equity piece of the formula. It starts by counting students. This is a student-driven formula meant to, designed many years ago to recognize how many students the state needs to educate. The February 1 count is where we start. So when we start the fiscal year, which begins in July, we use the prior February because it's the data that we have, most recent data that we have. Over the years, we did study that and determined that February was a good point at which to take the count to use in the subsequent fiscal year. We then not only count the students in what we call the base membership as one, we have weights in the formula, and these weights are meant to recognize special characteristics, particularly those that we have determined over the years cost more to provide educational services to. So we start out with those that are deemed to be economically disadvantaged, and those students we weight at 22% more than we do just as a regular student that we count only as one. That would include students that qualify for any of the social programs that we currently fund. That would include like SNAP, free and reduced price lunch, Medicaid. We match those huge databases to our student count and recognize those students as possibly needing extra services because they've been deemed to be economically disadvantaged under the current definition. The career and technical education weight is 6%, and it was originally designed to supplement the cost of providing career and tech courses. We know that supplies are particularly costly in those courses, and that weight was meant to recognize that additional cost. The special education weight is 150%. That means that any student who has been identified as with an IEP as having one of the 16 identified disabilities is counted as not only one, but 1.5 times greater. So they are counted as 2.5. And that is to recognize that there are services that are very costly in supporting the educational outcomes of those particular students. Gifted and talented here in Louisiana, we actually give extra money to gifted and talented, recognizing that the services for those students cost more, and that is 60% more for the gifted and talented students. Economy of scale is where we recognize small school systems. Over the years, we've determined that there are any school system who has 7,500 students or less have some base costs that they have to pay no matter how many kids they have, like pay for things in the building, or they have to always have a principal, and things like that at the school level. So we give them, depending on how far away or close they are to 7,500, we give them a curvilinear additional weight. It can be 0 to 20%, depending on where they fall in that 7,500 students. All of these weights were studied over the years. We had school finance experts come in and do lots of analysis and things, and work with the MFP Task Force over the years and other stakeholders to come up with these weights. So we have a good basis on which we actually made these decisions. It's very common to have weights like this in other states, although Louisiana is kind of in the forefront of how much research we've done and how we recognize these students. Once we have the students, we add all those students together because we look at the number of students. Once we add in the weights, we have all the base students as one. We add in all the weights. We come up with that total weight in student membership, and that's where we then multiply that membership by what you call the base per pupil amount, and that is heavily discussed. That is an input, is what is right now at $4,015 per child. That is what has been deemed as to be the estimate of how much it would cost for a student to be educated in Louisiana. That 4,015 is set by Bessie and agreed upon in the resolution by the legislature. And again, it is an input and gives us that total educational cost. And that's where we, according to the Constitution, we begin to share that cost based on the fact that the Constitution requires it to be a partnership between the state and the locals with regards to funding education. Next, the state and local share of each of that cost is determined, and that cost is determined first by looking at the ability of the school systems to support education in their communities. And this is done through their ability to raise local revenues. That includes property taxes and sales taxes primarily. The potential to raise revenue is how we measure their ability, and we look at their potential, not their actuals at this point. We look at their potential to raise revenue and consider that their wealth to contribute. We do that through the net assessed taxable property value, and we look at the sales tax base, which we create using the actual sales tax collected divided by the rates. That potential is better to measure their ability to generate revenue, not what they're actually doing, and it helps us put everybody on a similar playing field. Any changes in that net assessed taxable property and the sales tax base impacts their potential and creates upward or downward shifts in their allocations throughout the years. And that's why on an annual basis, we get an updated amount of that net assessed taxable property and their sales tax revenue. They are prior year because that's the most recently final and audited data. So we do use prior year to do that. Next, we have to look at the next step in dividing and determining their share is that we look to calculate the formula and all the math calculates a state level millage and a rate that generates at the end of the calculation a split that is 65% state funded cost and 35% local cost. That does not mean that every district is going to be funded at 65-35 because it all depends on their ability to support the cost. We do have some districts who have very low tax bases, and in that case, to be equitable, the state comes in and recognizes that, and we actually pay a little more for a district who is unable to pay. All the school systems tax themselves to a great degree now. That was not true 30 years ago when the formula was first designed, but today everyone has raised taxes to a great extent. We look, once we determine that local share, based on that, we apply we apply a standard state level rate that is calculated by the formula. We apply that to their individual net assessed taxable property and their individual sales tax rate and come up with their amount. Once we do that, that is considered their local share. And we subtract that from the cost of their individual cost that was generated in those first calculations. The balance of that is going to be what the state puts up. Some systems, for example, there are systems now who actually have, have very low tax collections and have not been able to tax themselves for a variety of reasons. So we could have some districts who we may pay 80% by the state and only 20% from the locals. But we do have a couple of systems who have been very fortunate and who we actually have a floor in the formula that allows us to pay them at a minimum of 25%. They have been very fortunate that their tax revenues, Iberville and Cameron being two of them, that they are have so much to contribute to the cost of education in their communities, but the floor has been set so that the state does contribute at a minimum of 25%. Level 2 now is where we move. Once we have that local share, that's the end of level 1. Again, that's how we distribute about 2/3 of the $4 billion. And then we move into level 2. Level 2 was set up to reward the school systems for actually going out and raising local revenue. And when we get there, we're looking at actual revenues, both property and sales, and there's a few other real estate income, like 16 section lands, that we all add together to determine what they may be eligible for as a reward. The amount of local revenues used, if the reward is warranted, is in excess. So we don't give them a reward on their full amount that they collect. We look to see what they were able to contribute in the level 1 calculation, and we look at a overage there to say, oh, okay, you went above that minimum, which is your local share, and raised revenues beyond that. If that's the case, we then multiply that cost by 35% as a cap, and we measure that excess against that cap, and as long as they are below the cap, because we realized many years ago we had to have some limit to the reward, then they do get a percentage revenue there. That is about $1 billion of the cost of the formula right now, and all the school systems has met their minimum, have done this so for many years. We actually have a few school systems who are generating so much revenue that they are now ineligible for level 2 rewards because they have generated so much revenue they are beyond the amount of the cap. Once we have level 1 calculated and level 2 calculated, that's considered the equity piece of the formula. Those two provisions have been tested in court years ago and been determined by the courts to be an equitable distribution of state funds. We then move into level 3. Level 3 was designed to be some supplementary allocations. They are all student-driven because the formula was designed to be primarily student-driven, and they consist of 3 different pots of money. The first one is a continuation of some prior year pay raises. There were some pay raises provided by the state in the 2000s, the early to mid-2000s, and the state continues that through a per-pupil mechanism. That is the first of the 3. That is almost $500 million that we continue in that level 3. And that pay raise, you might have heard people talk about the average per pupil amount that is generated by the formula. It is a per pupil amount that comes from level 1, level 2, and level 3, inclusive of these items. The second item in level 3 is called the historical formula allocation. A lot of people know it as hold harmless. It was a very, very old provision that's been in existence since the formula was flipped over in the early 90s. And it actually contributes about $38 million to 11 districts who had some insurance and pay raise money that they did not actually, they actually got in the late 80s, I guess. And in the transformation of the formula from an expenditure-driven formula to our per-pupil-driven formula, they did not receive that money, and many legal discussions and things were determined that they are entitled to that. There is another $38 million that is distributed amongst all those non-11 districts, and they get that on a per-pupil basis, and that's to sort of recoup for them what those hold harmless districts got over the years. This has been discussed many times in the legislature, and I think this final resolution of this was endorsed by Bessie in the legislature as a way to make sure this was fair. The last thing is the mandated cost. This was at a time in the 2000s where fuel and insurance and retirement was just increasing, spiking astronomically. And Bessie went to the legislature and asked for $100 per pupil at the time, or maybe a little bit less than that, to help defray those costs. Since then, I think it was $90 at first, and it's been grown to $100 per pupil, but that has not been increased since 08-09. And so that compensates for operational costs that have spiked over the years. Level 4 is relatively new to the formula, meaning it's been here maybe 10 or 11, 12 years. It contains some very specific programmatic type allocations. So it is separate and apart from level 1, 2, and 3, but it accomplishes many things that have been endorsed by Bessie and the legislature over the years as being important to education. The first of these is the international teacher allocation. This supports salary and stipends for the teachers that we recruit to come here from other countries like Belgium and France and Spain to help teach the international language in the communities across the state. We have about 256 teachers right now that we support. Those school systems where they are employed get $21,000 to help defray the cost of the salaries. And they also get, the teachers will get an installation stipend. At one point in the past, it was determined that we were having a hard time recruiting, and it was because of the expensive nature of coming to Louisiana. And so there is a stipend that helps that teacher in that first year, and then a retention stipend is also offered if they stay through the 3 years. They can get it in the second year they're here and the third year that they're here. The second one is called Career Development Fund. This is funding to support very specific career training and certifications. Right now, it's at about $25 million that we give out annually. We do update those counts every year to the courses where they're enrolled. So it's every student that's enrolled in a career course that qualifies under a certain parameter of courses. They get $241 right now per course enrollment. And that's how we generate the $25 million that is distributed amongst all the school systems. The supplemental course allocation was designed to be allocated based on enrollments in grades 7 through 12. Students enrolled in those grades times $70 per student. That generates about a little over $20 million, and that is distributed across the board where those students fall. And that money can be used for courses outside the normal school day. Particularly, this goes to dual enrollment courses right now. High-cost services, that money is designed to assist with the very expensive nature of services for students who have maybe multiple disabilities. We know that some of those student services can be just very, very costly. So this is designed on an application basis where school systems apply. We review the applications and determine, what they actually spent in the prior year, and we give them a percentage reimbursement for anything of their expenses that is beyond a minimum amount. And we consider that amount that would be normal for them to spend as like an average expenditure amount, which we calculate. As long as that cost is 3 times that average, they may apply, and we are able right now with the $12 million that is annually set aside for this to give them a percentage reimbursement for those costs. Fifth is the teacher mentor stipend allocation. That allocation compensates mentors who actually have at least one or multiple residents that they are mentoring during the school year. We connect those dots, make sure they are providing those services. If that's the case, that mentor will get $2,000 stipend for their services. Right now we have about 1,000 mentors in the most recent allocation we just made. So it's costing us about $2 million. We've seen that program grow. It started out very small, but as this program ramps up, we knew that it would grow a little bit each year. The last thing in level 4 is the certificated and support worker pay raises. We have 3 of them that have been made permanent in the formula. There's one from 1920 that is $1,000 certificated and $500 support. There's one from 21-22 that is $800 certificated and $400 support. And there's one from 22-23 that is $1,500 certificated and $750 for support. We do adjust those the allocations on an annual basis based on the most recent staffing collection. So the amount that they actually receive is adjusted on an annual basis for those pay raises, as well as we adjust the retirement rates, because this also includes a contribution to the retirement system, the employer contribution to the retirement system. With that, that is the quickest MFP description I think I've ever done. And try to make it very concise. You can also, for your future, later reference, there's a one-pager, more of a visual that tells you first what we did in 22-23 and the formula that was adopted, HCR 23. We have a record of what was proposed in 23-24. And what we ended up with for 23-24 was that the SCR2 was not adopted by the legislature, so the law provided that we went back to HCR 23. And with that, I'm done.
Thank you, Ms. Shona, I really appreciate it. I neglected to get a motion in a second for us to do all of that, so could I have a motion in a second to receive the report just given by Ms. Shona? Motion by Ms. Pope, second by Mr. Harris. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Thank you very much. Now,
Sure. Next item is consideration of a discussion regarding recommendations for the 2024-2025 MFP.
I'll turn it over to Dr. Brumley.
Yeah, we need a motion to discuss.
Okay, so they're telling me we need a motion in a second for Dr. Brumley to speak. So we have a motion by Dr. Mills, seconded by Ms. Champagne. All in favor, say
You don't
aye.
have to vote yet.
No, we have.
Yeah, let him do his.
My wife may start imposing that rule at home. It might die on a lack of a second. No, we have to start somewhere with an opening bid, right? I think Mr. Birkin is correct in that it's oftentimes very difficult to find a place with this particular work where everyone can agree because of various reasons. But I do believe that at the heart of the discussion is an interest to better serve kids across the state of Louisiana, no matter the role that we all play here today. And so what I have done, you will be receiving two different documents, and I'll lead with the first document. And so the first document is a resolution to support educator stipends. It's a bit unusual to offer a resolution related to this. However, after hearing from leadership in the House and the Senate, from the governor's office, there really does intend to be an amount of support around this particular item and the pay raise being outside of the MFP, not inside the MFP. But I want to, from my office's standpoint, at least signal in a formal way that outside of the kindergarten, there's nothing more important than the classroom teacher for student success. And we too want to support this meaningful educator stipend. And so I crafted a resolution. It simply talks about some of the good work that teachers do, some of the outcomes that our teachers have helped our state achieve. It mentions Governor Landry through his executive budget supporting a meaningful educator stipend. It references House Speaker DeVilliers signaling support for a meaningful educator stipend. It recognizes Senate President Cameron Henry signaling his support for a meaningful educator stipend. And so what this resolution concludes with is the request for a $2,000 stipend for certificated personnel and a $1,000 stipend for support personnel to be included in the upcoming budget. And also it suggests that this particular resolution, should it pass, be transmitted to the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education and then various members of our state government. So this is the first item I would like to introduce. And then the second item I'll introduce is specifically relative to MFP and shifts within the MFP. Lots of conversations have unfolded over the last few months, over the last week or two. They have increased in their significance of trying to get this right. And I understand that this particular proposal, as it does every year, will probably lead to a number of substitute motions and votes to try to get to a place where everyone can agree, or we may not. But what this particular MFP proposal does, if you go to page 2, it does indicate that it maintains base per pupil the same in level 1 at $4,015. So it holds level 1 consistent. I would point out here that, and Beth, correct me if I'm wrong, over the course of the last 10 years, there's only been one increase in level 1, and that was 5 years ago. So I do think, and I have a feeling superintendents in the room and maybe others may point this out later as well, but I do want to just point out that over the last decade, there's only been one level 1 increase in the formula. Now, there are additions, you can say, to the formula that I've added in here. The first being continuing the differentiated compensation model at $25 million. This is funded in the present year. This is funded right now. It's just funded outside of the MFP at $25 million. And so what this would do, it would be a block grant to local school systems to address market needs with some parameters in place. So the parameters in place would be critical shortage areas, and these would be critical shortage areas that I would recommend to the state board. The state board would approve, and they would make those particular critical shortage areas eligible for additional dollars. In this year's motion, and what was accepted by the board, lists K through 12 special education, secondary math, and secondary science. Those are the 3 critical shortage areas. And if you look at the workforce report that we have to submit to the federal government annually, in this particular school year, in this workforce report, the areas that are listed as Louisiana teacher shortage areas are world language, English as a second language, middle and secondary math, and middle and secondary science. So with the exception of world language and ESL, we're consistent with that report, and we made the decision this year with our recommendation to the state board to add in K-12 special education because we know how important that particular work is. I would also call out with the teacher recruitment and retention compensation study that was completed this last year, where our consultant interviewed local school systems, collected data from local school systems. When they looked at hard-to-fill positions, 94% of local school systems said that special education teachers were hard-to-fill positions. 91% said high schools were difficult, 79% middle school, and 46% elementary. So as you go down in the grade bands, or if you go up in the grade bands rather, it's more difficult to fill positions according to information we receive from local school systems. And also when they're looking at subject matter in the same particular study of local school systems, 99% of school systems indicated that math was difficult for them to staff. 85% said that science was difficult for them to staff, their HR directors. 63% said foreign language. In this particular report, it also made a recommendation that the state should facilitate and support market-based differential pay mechanisms that allow local school systems to better address critical shortage areas, math, science, special ed, and hard-to-staff schools, and reward highly effective and teacher leadership. I'll also point out on the differentiated compensation piece that in the governor's transition report, his official transition report, it says that we should bolster teacher recruitment and teacher compensation to allow funding to meet greatest need in critical shortage areas, exceptional performance of teachers, teacher leadership, and high-need schools. And so that's what this particular piece does. It provides $25 million within the MFP for market-driven compensation for local school systems to pay additional dollars to teachers, critical shortage, high-need schools, and highly effective teachers. On the second piece, which is workforce development, I think we can all agree that we have to do more work in our state around career and technical education, vocational crafts. That work has been diminished for too long. We need to elevate that work. We are trying to be a catalyst for work-based internship opportunities where students can go out into the workforce experience that work. But also, a step up beyond that is the full apprenticeship piece, where students can go out into the field, work to become an apprentice in something like HVAC or plumbing and electrical, and then duly graduate as a fully certified apprentice, but also receive their high school degree. So what this particular proposal calls for is $2 million for apprentice and internship opportunities. This money would go to school systems to support their efforts for funding internships and apprenticeships within their school systems. On the apprenticeship piece, we recognize that it is oftentimes more difficult in rural areas because of what exists, but also transportation issues to find apprenticeships. And so we have a higher weight in rural systems of $3,500 per student, and in non-rural systems, $2,500 per student. Then when we're talking about internships, we're offering here in this proposal $1,000 per enrolled student for internship opportunities. Now again, this is not going to cover every apprenticeship opportunity throughout the state of Louisiana or every internship opportunity, but it's a process of continuing to build that capacity within our state. We know it will be good for students. We know it will be good for the economy. This item here is presently funded in the state budget outside of the MFP at $1.5 million. And so what we're doing is turning this into a $2 million so that we can add internships as well to what already existed with apprenticeships. I'll call out here too in the governor's transition report. His transition report says we need to expand educational options, enabling high schoolers to receive career and technical education in addition to traditional high school education. And so again, that's from the governor's transition report. When you go to the next item, which is tutoring, this is a new allocation. It's an allocation of $30 million, which should be provided as a block grant for Accelerate tutoring initiatives, particularly in K through 5 literacy and math. We know that we have to do a better job at the state in those lower grade levels around the science of reading, and we have a lot of good work happening there, but we also have to tackle foundational math. An emerging body of research is happening around high dosage tutoring. We want to be able to support that work. We do feel like there will be legislative instruments around this particular body of work, and so this is a mechanism to push some money out to school systems to support what we believe is important, but also what we believe will be coming legislatively. I'll point out here again too in the governor's transition report, it says we must encourage the utilization of high dosage tutoring to ensure children are developing their skills, especially in literacy and foundational numeracy. And then the final piece is an increased support for mandated operational costs. Beth mentioned that the current per student amount is $100 per student. This is an allocation to help support utilities within schools, fuel charges, many of those things that we know the price of these items are not the same today in 2024 as they were in 2008, 2009 when this $100 per student amount was set. If we look at consumer price index from 08 to 09, the inflationary rate is 44% from that point until today. That would move that $100 to $144 per student. My proposal calls for making up half of that ground, 22% of that ground of inflationary expenses. Again, this $100 per student hasn't been increased since 08, 09. And this is funding some of the things for which school leaders are telling me they are seeing increased costs. And it's hard to argue against the fact that fuel is higher, insurance is higher, utilities are higher, and that dollar amount hasn't been increased since 08, 09. And so the price tag on that of taking care of half of that inflationary work is $14.3 million. And so those are that's kind of the opening bid to start the conversation. It's not easy to get to a place where you have a starting point to try to jumpstart that conversation, but we do feel like this particular proposal takes into account many of the things for which we've heard, but also recognizes the financial situation of the state and trying to take care of that as well. And so you have two items. One, a resolution to support the stipends, and two, you have an opening bid there on MFP. As I understand, the Superintendent's Association has some comments they would like to make, so I'm going to turn that over to Mr.
I
Clarkson.
need to make a substitute motion to.
We haven't even, I haven't even made a motion, so just going to turn it over.
Discussion.
Right. I appreciate it, Dr. Bowman. I agree with you. I think if you look back, even from part of our stance, and that's 69 superintendents, we've not funded education over the past years. You mentioned that in your presentation, and that's kind of where ours is going also. If we had funded certain levels over the past 10 to 20 years, I don't think we'd be in this situation. I think we could handle that from the local level if the money had been put in through the MFP for us to handle the operational costs, the extra money for each student. So I'm just going to forget the handout. And these are some recommendations that the Superintendent's Association's come up with. Number one, since 2004, 2005, that's 18 years, the base per pupil has only increased $556. Beginning in 2010 until even now, we've seen and continue to see many reforms and changes in K-12. It's hard to imagine the cost of a minimum program of educating a child to keep pace with the financial demands of the school system in that period. With the inadequate funding formula, the results are considerable differences between rural districts and less affluent districts. Appropriately funding and distributing equitable with necessary resources to address required increases in academic requirements is vitally important. According to the Louisiana Constitution, Betsy shall annually adopt a formula which shall be used to determine the cost of the MFP for education. The cost of the MFP of education was last determined in 1996. School systems continue to face rising costs in operation of our systems, providing the services and resources needed to provide the minimum programs of education. ESSER's funding provided additional monies during the COVID years and was spent on many areas to help recover from the loss of learning as well as needed supplies. These funds will expire during the 24 year. Success in addressing student learning loss was actually realized utilizing these funds and programs provided to school systems by LDOE. Sustaining these programs will now prove to be a challenge when ESSER is gone. Normal inflation increases range from 3 to 6% in cost of operations, increased health care costs, increased costs to address measures to improve school safety and security, and the rising cost of property insurance. I don't know if y'all have seen that a lot lately, but it has gone skyrocketing. Increased professional development costs with the implementation of new standards and changes in school accountability, and meeting requirements and technology capacity for mandated online testing and virtual learning. So the Superintendent's Association would like to support the increase in the per pupil level 1 by 1.375% and the inclusion of pay raises for 1,500 in the level 4 formula. I believe this was done back in 1920. And I truly believe this has been done for the past years, or if our government would budget this and we use this as a reoccurring, we wouldn't have to address a lot of these extras. It would be built in our local LEAs to be able to fund them. So I think it's kind of like doing my checkbook. I have to take what I make budgeted and look in the future what I can and can't do. I think we need to do education the same way. We know inflation is going to go up. We know the cost of security, putting cameras in, putting metal detectors in, having SRO officers we have to pay for. All the extras, this would help support that. You're talking about this increase is only $54 per child. It's $37 million for the 1.375. And if you did 1,500, That's about $100 million. So you're looking at $137 million a year. If our government could look at putting that in the budget and Bessie approved that, let that reoccur, then we can do a lot of extras with all that and not keep coming back to this and having these same discussions year in and year out. It becomes almost like a carrot in front of us. We're going to give a raise this year or we're not going to do it the next year. If teachers know there's a step increase for them meeting their accountability needs and that they're going to get $1,000 a year, in 5 years it's a $5,000 raise, in 10 years that's $10,000. You're going to be above the Southern average, and teachers will stay for that reason and their benefits. We're trying to figure out teacher retention. We're trying to find ways to keep teachers in education. Extending their years to teach for 40 years, and also putting more on them and then not paying them what they're worth. I agree, the government came out with law enforcement, and they're wanting to make that a critical area. Why can't we make education a critical area also? So from the Superintendent's Association, we'd like the 1.375 and the 5,000, 1,000, and 4. Thank you.
I'm sorry, you said level 4, 5,000 and 1,000.
Well, I'm sorry, 1,500, yes, I'm sorry. I was thinking over 5 years ago, I'm trying to help you.
It's okay. Any other discussion on Dr. Brumley's proposal? Someone else has a proposal? Yes, Ms. Shelton.
I don't have a proposal, but I would like to state that Mr. Joseph David could not be here because they have their annual conference in Lake Charles, but he did ask me to read this statement as a part of their opinion for the principals. The Louisiana Association of Principals fully supports permanent salary increases for Louisiana's educational workforce. The association is composed of almost 1,000 principals from all grade levels, all geographic regions, and socioeconomic levels. And widespread teacher shortage is a major area of concern for all. One of the main reasons this is because of the current salary and the competitive salaries of neighboring states. Arkansas teachers were given a $2,000 pay raise last year. Florida teachers were given a pay raise every year for the last 5 years. Mississippi teachers were given an average pay raise of $5,100. Texas teachers can expect to earn between $56,000 and $65,000 a year in the beginning of their career. In Louisiana, new teachers have an average salary of $37,117. Most politicians, business leaders, industry professionals, and the population at large agree that educators are essential workers and professionals deserving honor and respect. Actions, however, often speak louder than words, and the legislature's failure to provide competitive financial security to Louisiana educators only serves to degrade the profession. Proof of this can be found in the marked decline of students pursuing a degree in education, which only adds to the current teacher shortage. The proposed stipend, a repeat of the last 2 years, will not bring our teacher salaries in line with the Southern Region education average. It will not provide the financial security incoming students are seeking. It will not give educators the support, respect, and professional treatment that is deserved. If education in Louisiana is truly a priority, if the success of our children and future leaders is indeed valued, then it is time to prove it. LAP is asking that the MFP Task Force support a permanent raise for all Louisiana educators and support staff. And personally, I'd like to add as a follow-up to what Mr. Claxton said, I think it's great that the governor declared a state of emergency and recognizes that we have to do something to improve the police force because there's 1,800 vacancies currently statewide. I have a son who is a part of a police force, so I understand that is a great need. But I think it's also time, as Mr. Claxton said, that we recognize we have an emergency in education. I'm reading from a report that was written that stated that we have up to 2,500 vacancies in classrooms across the state. So we have more teacher vacancies than they have in the police state of emergency. And it affects almost 50,000 students a year. If that is not a clear sign that we need to do something to shore up support for teachers, Our numbers continually diminish because nobody thinks it's a profession they want to go into anymore. We have to make it a baseline. We have to make sure that the teachers who are there know that we are standing up for them and that we are actually encouraging people to come into the profession. We are at a tremendously significant low in being able to fill positions. And I actually am on a school board in a parish that we, at this point in the year, still have 19 teacher vacancies. That means that several hundred students every day go without having a teacher in their classroom. And if that is not something that we need to address, I don't know what is. So we are asking, again, that a permanent pay raise be placed in the formula so that we can send the message to teachers that this is a profession you want to enter and it's also a profession you want to stay in.
Thank you, Ms. Sherman. And Dr. Neal?
I just wanted to compliment Dr. Brumley's plan to attract more teachers to the profession. I was a supervisor in the middle school district, and any help that we can get attracting science, math, SPED teachers to the profession is greatly appreciated. I would also urge legislators to do whatever they can to turn these proposed stipends to actual raises in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Neal. Yes, Ms. Hughes.
Hey there, Mary Beth Hughes with Lobby. I just had a question. How much would this proposal cost the state? I didn't see it.
Ours or?
Yours.
Brumley's?
Yeah, yours.
Well, you're talking about 37 million, Beth. We talked about the 1.375 in 19. And if you did 1,500, it was around 100 million, is that right?
Correct.
So about 137 million a year.
Maybe a little bit more depending on the data. The 37 may be closer to 40 now.
But see, that would also take care of a lot of our dual enrollment. If we had that money, we wouldn't have to ask for more money in dual enrollment. I mean, we could sit here and debate it all day, but I think that would knock out a lot of our problems for the future.
Ms. Roman?
Hi. Caroline Romer, Louisiana Association of Public Charter Schools. Thank you, Dr. Brumley, for your proposal. As an association and charter schools, we like to talk about two things in particular: autonomy and allowing charter schools to make decisions as close to students as possible, and therefore giving them the money, telling them what the standard is, and getting out of the way. And if they don't meet that standard, they don't get to do the work anymore. So once again, as we have for many years, we too support more level 1 funding, holding districts accountable to outputs versus mandating inputs. Second thing that we talk about a lot is we love to see a good differentiated funding formula. It's not just about money following students, it's about money following the needs of those students. It seems we have hit a wall, though, over the years in getting any more funding in level 1. So I start looking at the rest of what we've got going, and I do have a couple questions if it's appropriate to ask them. I'll start with the differentiated formula that you presented, Ms. Zeno. I'm curious. You talked about studies and work done on that formula. Currently, we fund economically disadvantaged students at a 22% weight, and gifted and talented at 60. What would happen if you flipped that? What would happen if we put more money behind economically disadvantaged students versus gifted and talented? And when I say that, like, I don't know how many gifted and talented students we have, and I'm not demeaning the importance of gifted and talented, but I am going to highlight the needs of economically disadvantaged students. Too often, those are the students that, again, are below grade level and need so many different types of support. So curious about how that, you may not be able to say off the top of your head how that would affect current funding.
Well,
Yeah,
I
I
can
can ask as well.
There's about over 400,000 in economically disadvantaged students that we count, and that number has increased some over the last few years. Obviously, it would be a huge cost increase if we were to count them higher. I don't know that it would be an even match about the money, but we do have quite a few economically disadvantaged students.
And currently, the differentiated formula does not differentiate for ELL students?
It does include ELL
It does.
students, yeah, I apologize, I didn't.
And what section does that fall in?
That's an economically disadvantaged factor. So we have about 6 things in the current membership definition that we define economically disadvantaged, and ELL is one of them.
Got it. Again, I think that's something, we've talked over the years about regrouping and looking at the MFP, what it actually costs to educate students and that sort of thing. So I would argue that I think there's an opportunity to take a look at the formula and consider if we can further differentiate and maybe even change some of those numbers. A question, just again, don't understand. We have a weight for career in tech at 6%. And then you also have, I can't remember if it's in level 1 funding, the career development fund. Are those the same things, funding the same things?
No, those were intended to fund 2 different things. The 6% was strictly determined to support supplies, maybe a little bit beyond supplies, but it was meant to be, the welding supplies, and now obviously it would be some technology with things too. The Career Development Fund is specifically managed and administered for courses, for the expansion and development of career courses. So that's what that is for. And there are, some struggles in some communities on using that money, but the program officer of the department has a very good guidance and parameters under which people should operate and spend that money, and they watch it very carefully.
Thank you. Bear with me, I just have 2 more questions. High cost needs. Is there more demand than currently in the pool for high cost needs?
Yes, there has always been more demand than we've had money. Right now, on average, I would say you might receive about 60% of whatever you request, but the $12 million is capped right now. And so we have a mechanism that looks at each individual. We divide the $12 million into money that goes to the city parish and then money that goes to the charters. And then the draw on those pots of money, we allocate every penny, but either one only gets about, maybe on average, about 60% of what they request.
Okay, another area that I feel like could be considered as a funding need. Finally, and maybe this is a question to Dr. Brumley, on your accelerated tutoring at $30 million, I do not disagree that tutoring helps kids. We have seen it specifically in some of our charter schools using a variety of AI and other types of things. But I'm curious, there was an article just this morning that says less than 1% of students are accessing the current dollars that are there for tutoring. What's going on and how does this work?
Yeah, so, I take some degree of, I disagree with some of the article, just because what happened is that's all relative to the Steve Carter Literacy Program, which is a voucher program beyond the school day. It doesn't have to do with the school day. It provides a $1,000 stipend to families who want to access tutoring through a vendor after the school day. The legislature created that program and did not fund it. And so there was a push on us, there was a push on me, well, you have this program, you've got to get it up and running. There was no money to do it. So we had no idea how much demand we would have on that particular program. So we took $40 million of our SEA set aside for, from the ESSER dollars. And we said, look, we'll initially commit that amount of money to this program because we don't know what demand will be. Over time, we saw that the demand was not going to be $40 million, so we redirected that money and allocations to systems for tutoring efforts, to other types of endeavors over time. So for someone to indicate that only 1%, well, that was based on a guess to begin with to make sure that we were covered should we have high demand. Another issue with Steve Carter in the way in which it was crafted, it says that certified teachers have to deliver the services. Well, we know that many of the tutoring vendors out there across the state, they don't necessarily use certified teachers. So I think that's an opportunity within the program to make an adjustment. Another concern with the program is with the $1,000 limitation, by us offering $40 an hour, some of the private vendors are telling us, well, we're not doing it unless we can make X amount, which is higher than that amount. And the other piece that's really important with Steve Carter, in the legislation itself, it says that in order to provide that tutoring, you have to go through the science of reading training, which we know is a 50, 60-hour effort. And so keeping that bar really high, that means that we only have about 1,700 kids across the state participating. I do think that will grow as we're able to build the infrastructure across through the state. Now, is that ever going to be a $40 million program? No, it's not. But I think for the families who use it, it's working for many of those families. So that particular program is an outside the day model. What this is referencing is with what we're asking school systems to do around meeting individual needs of students, particularly in K-5 reading and math, and in alignment to the governor's transition report, trying to push out some initial money early to support those efforts. Because we know there will be associated costs with doing that.
Thank you. Again, LAPCS supports as much autonomy for districts and charters to make decisions as close to students as possible. That's the resolution that we will be looking for that does that well. And again, long-term, we would like to see consideration of changes to the differentiated funding formula at the student level. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, Dr. LaFleur.
I would also like to speak to what Ms. Romer just mentioned. It's not just charter schools that would like autonomy. I don't want to have the conversation that only charter schools can be creative and innovative, although we do understand the mission of a charter school. But as a superintendent of a school district where we're trying to establish a culture of creativity and innovation, it takes a need for some autonomy. How do you get autonomy? Well, if I know how much we're going to get from the state because of this formula and because of what we're supposed to get from the state, then I can continue to hopefully build a culture that is outside the traditional way of educating students. And I know that's part of the conversation, especially from the legislative office and maybe the governor's perspective, in that we are able to provide in our local educational district the needs, to meet the needs of our community, of our students. So we fully have aligned with the Department of Education, and this is a lot of intentionality, Dr. Brumley, in this presentation. We appreciate this from the superintendent's perspective, but with the intentionality, I think what could potentially be problematic is how many different allocations are we going to keep coming back to the table for? Because I could, SCA, we're gonna have the Board of Regents come to Calcasieu on Wednesday to talk about dual enrollment increase, and we've increased our dual enrollment significantly. And again, that costs money out of the allocation, but we hope to exceed that allocation. And then you start talking about, do we need an allocation for security? Safety and security, I would think, is a sense of urgency for school systems. And from the governor's perspective, I have law enforcement father, law enforcement brother, retired state troopers. So I get that, no question, but I think it's a state of emergency for education as well. I felt it was a state of emergency in last spring when we implemented SROs at all of our elementaries based upon the Covenant school shooting in Nashville and the Uvalde school shooting, both elementary schools. So there's a sense of urgency. That costs money to the tune of $2 million to put SROs in all of the elementaries. Technology, and again, thanks to the Department of Education, we hope we have aligned with the spirit of Dr. Brumley's viewpoint and his mindset with regard to what we do for our students in education, giving them the most opportunity and taking into consideration how we can leverage all of the assets that we have, leveraging certifications, even though we may have lack of certification, leveraging the deficiencies in the workforce, doing all those things, and with the autonomy and having technological dollars from ESSER, not from this formula, but from ESSER, which is going away September the 30th, 2024. I don't know how many times we said that in all of our meetings locally, going away. So how do we continue and have the sustainability for technology? The state of Louisiana Department of Education gave us the Models of Excellence Award. We are so proud of that award. We continue to be proud of that award. What is a concern now is how do we sustain a program that we feel like is now hopefully a model for districts not only in Louisiana but maybe across the country. How do we sustain that without having the appropriate funding? So yeah, having the autonomy, having the ability to be creative and innovative does require us to have a sense of latitude with what we do with the money. And we feel like with our team, we can decide on the internal allocation for our kids, for our district, for our community and industry needs, as opposed to coming back each and every year and developing new allocations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ford. Anyone else? Yes, Dr. Mills.
Thank you. Excuse me. SCR 2, the 2023 legislative session included a stipend of $2,000 for teachers and $1,000 for support professionals. It included a resolution that urges Betsy to put the $198 million in level 4 of the MFP and make it a permanent pay raise in the 2024 legislative session. Our best and brightest are hanging on by a thread. We need to fund permanent pay raises for all school employees in order to stop the bleeding on our inability to recruit and retain staff. Our neighboring states continue to move the needle of the Southern Regional average by funding healthy pay raises. We talk about school choice a lot. Well, our educators are making the choice as well to leave the state and work for higher salaries. According to the Texas Education Agency, which is the state agency that oversees primary and secondary public education, there is evidence that at least 1,700 teachers from Louisiana are currently employed there. Perhaps it could be the efforts to pay them close to $90,000 to $100,000, which is definitely an effort that is being made in Houston and Dallas area. Our educators are performing. If you walk in the schools, the grass is cut, the floors are shining. Our children are being fed and learning more and more each day, ultimately becoming productive citizens of our society. Louisiana was #1 in the country in growth for 4th grade reading. Math scores improved from 50th to 44th. Reading scores improved from 48th to 38th in the country. Needless to say, our teachers and support professionals are working above and beyond the call of duty. We need to increase our educators' salaries to retain our hardworking, proven, dedicated, and qualified educators here in Louisiana to protect the future of our most precious resources, which is all of our students across our great state. And I would have to lift up the fact that I myself am raising a child that is a product of public education, along with my entire family. I've experienced a number of different instances where she has had a number of different classes that did not have certificated staff in those classrooms, and it is critical courses such as that. So I think that it would behoove us to really take a strong look at this before we make a decision today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mills. And Ms. Posey.
Thank you. Dr. Brumley, we appreciate you recognizing what educators have contributed to the increases in growth and awards that we've gotten as a state. what I will say is that, you mentioned the CPI has grown by 44% since 2008. Educators feel that as well. Since the last decade, we have given right under $4,000 in pay raises for teachers. That's the last decade. That doesn't come anywhere near meeting the cost it takes to raise a family or just to live. When we talk about recruiting and retaining teachers, it's important to realize that they have families, they have needs, just like everyone else. When they look at going into the profession, they think, will I be able to afford a reliable car? Will I be able to buy a house? Will I be able to educate my children? When you provide a stipend, they know that they can't count on that money. How are we going to keep people and get people into the profession? Providing a stipend doesn't do that. With respect, we ask that you guys make it a permanent pay raise. And we do recognize that the districts suffer from this too, but their proposal is that would actually be a pay cut from what teachers received last year. So with that in mind, we do ask that you make it a permanent pay raise. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Posey. Ms. Rowe.
Just sitting here thinking about last legislative session, I want to lean in on your experience. I still call you Mr. Chairman Harris, Chairman Harris. It was super disappointing to see the legislature last year take up the MFP resolution with, an hour left in session. Is there anything we as a group can do to signal that, that's not okay and there's a way to get that changed? Is that just a mindset? Or tell me a little bit about if we were to include in our resolution and you don't take up the MFP with an hour left in session.
That was a good softball question. No, it really depends on the dynamics of the legislature that year. I've been, the MFP we're operating under now was my SCR 2 years ago because last year's was rejected. And by the way, I was for last year's MFP, as y'all know. I was for the raises in there to be permanent. And it just didn't work out because I think the two sides of the houses were fighting over some other issues. And unfortunately, when you're making the sausage, that happens. What I would suggest is that this task force and Dr. Brumley, which I think he's done, kind of read the signals from the legislature, because ultimately we can send over an MFP with $4,000 in raises and they can reject it. We can send it over with $2,000 in raises. They're probably going to reject it because they do face over a $600 million deficit next year. And there's no guarantee the .45 tax will be renewed, and right now, just from who I'm talking to and stuff, it's just not an appetite for that. So I think it behooves us as the task force and as Bessie and as LDOE to kind of listen to those tones coming out of the legislature, because there may be some other things that we can get in the MFP, or some other things such as taking a lot of these burdens off of teachers. Maybe there's an appetite to use that as some of these working together with the legislature as a bargaining chip to get some of these things resolved in this year of knowing that there's a deficit coming. What I would hate to see is we set the precedent that Bessie sends over an MFP every year that's rejected. Then you're going to have your stipends outside of the MFP formula. You're going to have a lot of other stuff outside, and we're operating off of an MFP that could be 1 or 2 years old. And I've been through most of my legislative career, most of my years were dealing with deficits, and it's a very ugly situation, and it's very difficult for those legislators when they're having to deal with that. So I can see where they're coming from and the governor's coming from wanting to do this outside the MFP. Just your proposal would add $130 or $140 million a year in reoccurring expense. That would be on top of the $600 million deficit next year. So that's what they are looking at right now. So the other thing to your point, how do you not vote on it the last? Well, I think that Bessie would need to be vocal on that. I think this body would need to be vocal. I think the sooner we can send over a good MFP that people are comfortable with on both sides, I think that would help move it through the process. But we've been signaled, at least I have, that the legislature does not have an appetite for putting permanent raises in here. I'm just being honest with you. The governor apparently does not either because he put the stipends outside of the MFP formula. So if you really want to slow down the MFP formula, just send something over that just basically pushes it in their face, just to be honest with you. That would slow down the process. I think that we all need to talk and communicate to get it right. And as I was telling somebody earlier, this is making the roux right now. I've been through this a million times. We're actually doing the oil and flour right now. We got to add the chicken and stuff later as we go through this process. But really, I think it's communication because, and not disparaging anyone, but my years in the legislature have been, you know, we just get an MFP sent over there without anybody talking to those members that are going to be fostering that through the process on the Appropriations Committee, Finance Committee, Education, and of course, the most important are your Speaker and your President. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Thank you. I guess that was the point when I spoke earlier. It does seem like we've hit a wall in trying to increase anything, and so thinking about the current funds that we have, how best to utilize those funds on behalf of students with the greatest needs. I do appreciate that Dr. Brumley has presented something that, in my mind, does prioritize some of the greatest needs that our districts and our charters are facing. So for that, I do support that. Thank you.
Mr. Burke, just a comment as a follow-up to Mr. Harris's comments about reading the signals. You know, I in advance of this opening bid, so to speak, I mean, I personally had conversations with the Speaker of the House, personally had conversation with the President of the Senate, personally had conversation with the Governor. And so that's part of, you know, why I am where I am here. It's not because I don't want to jump out and say, oh, every teacher deserves X amount. It's not because of that. It's because of where we are in reality and trying to provide dollars to support some of the key work that I believe is coming. So just wanted to clarify that I've had those personal conversations in advance of this presentation.
Michelle Penn. Mr. Kim.
Yeah, excuse me, John Kay with the Governor's Office. I appreciate the work you've done, Superintendent, getting this prepared, and just want to echo the sentiments about the stipend and keeping it static as we move forward.
Michelle Penn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Mr. Harris's analogy on how things work, and that we want to make sure we send an MFP to the legislature with a message that we are increasing, but with another message of, I think it's a unique opportunity for all of us in this room right now to work together over the next year. One of my requests for resolutions would be that the MFP Task Force meet more regular in the next year so that we can discuss all of these options. So I appreciate Dr. Brumley for looking at this and bringing forth these resolutions, and I completely agree. And my resolution would be that we meet more frequently in the next year and foster that communication. I do believe that you will see with the new Bessie, new legislature, new administration, as well as school superintendents, principals, teachers, you will see that communication fostered in the next year. So I appreciate it, Dr. Brumley. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle Penn. Michelle?
So I was going to touch on what Mr. Harris spoke about, just for clarification, so that for new people on the committee, that they understand that this recommendation that's made for the, whatever the MFP, goes from Bessie to the legislature, and they can't change it. They can either say yes or no, but if they say no, it can go back to Bessie, and Bessie would then resend another resolution based on whatever the rejection is. So here's the point that I'd like to make. I've been an educator for over 45 years. I've served as a math teacher, as a principal, I've served as an assistant superintendent, State Department of Education, chief academic officer in the Recovery School District, and I currently am serving as a school board member. But I am going to share that I don't understand how we don't say that education has got to have high expectations. We ask students, we ask teachers, we ask everyone in this profession to constantly shoot for the highest expectation. So when we say we're going to accept less, then we are sending the message to everyone else in this state that we do not believe that education needs to be a top priority. It is in a state of emergency. It does need the funding. And if we don't ask for it, we will not get it. It's just like when I have a student in the class and I don't say to them, I expect you to be able to make an A or a B on this test because I really know his level is down here, but I want him to think that I know he can do his best. If we don't go to the legislators and say, we think this is what we need, then we give them the easy way out. Then they just say, okay, we're gonna fund that, and you just have to live with it. Well, we can't anymore because we can't fill positions in classrooms. We can't, even with effectiveness pay. We don't have teachers, and I heard Dr. Brumley talk about the percent, 99% in math. I know, people don't graduate in math education anymore. You can't find those teachers. We have to do something to recruit and draw to the profession. Every time you give a stipend, you give a dollar amount that doesn't go towards people's retirement. So we're not only killing us on the front end of trying to get people to come in, we're killing people on the back end because any money that they get doesn't count towards their retirement if it's a stipend. I believe that we have to make a statement, and if it's not educators and Bessie making the statement, then I don't know who else will. That's it.
Ms. Conway?
I was going to clarify her point about QRSL. I was thinking that maybe Ms. Whitney could clarify the retirement piece of the stipend.
Yeah, sure. Ms. Whitney, you can clarify that piece for the retirement?
Right, so it is considered earnable compensation from the retirement perspective, and when Beth builds that in, that component is there.
Okay.
Just 2 points of clarification. Superintendent Brumley, on your proposals for the stipends, 2,000 and 1,000 in the resolution, do we have the cost estimate for that?
Yeah, that was what was included in the executive budget. It's $196 million.
196 million, and that, John, was in the executive budget presentation. Okay, I missed that. And then on the second part of your proposal, so the 71 million, you are proposing that being in the formula, so it would be recurring going forward.
Yes.
Great. And then my last question was around the legislature's action last year to put one-time money into the retirement debt in an effort to free up operational funds on an annual basis going forward. Do we have any estimates of what that freed up going forward for districts to try to spend on these inflationary expenses and other things we know are recurring?
So there were a number, it's not just a simple kind of answer, because there are a number of things that went into reamortization of debt. So ultimately, TRSL received exactly what they were supposed to receive via the Constitution. The bulk of the additional money that was being discussed actually went to lasers. So we did have a reamortization, but about 15% of that would have been supplemental appropriations from the legislature. About the other split was employer contribution variances and then excess investment earnings. So we did see a significant reduction in the employer contribution rate, but it was primarily related to a lot of other factors.
But we are seeing additional operational funds available to the district as a
Yes,
result of those
significant
payments. Thank you.
employer contribution reduction.
Would you recount the new percentages based on what we're using?
Right,
That would be
so
helpful.
the employer contribution rate for 24-25 for K-12 is 21.5%.
And did
And
you
that
make
is a
any-
reduction from 24%.
And do you have any idea what that might be, what that expense statewide reduction would be?
I have to do that math.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Harris?
Yeah, I would like to just kind of piggyback on, is it Dr.? Okay. And I appreciate what you have said, and I agree wholeheartedly with that. The exception being that the executive budget this year has put in $196 million for a stipend. And so, yes, if there wasn't any money in that budget to go to teachers getting a $2,000 stipend, I would say, and I would be 100% on board with you, let's put in some money in the MFP so that we can message to the legislature and to the governor that it is important that we have good teachers and we fill the shortage. And I believe the legislature is trying to do that, as is the governor with the stipend. But, looking at the long-term picture, what I would like to see and what I think we should envision is we get past this deficit, give this new legislature time next year to work out the tax reforms and that sort of thing that they have already said they are going to do with the governor. And hopefully we'll have a more stable form of revenue that we can then put in these permanent raises. But I think it's important that we keep the 2,000 going. It's better than nothing. If we send an MFP over with permanent raises in it, I appreciate the work that you've done with the legislature. And then they reject it, and then they come back, and then maybe the stipends go away. I'm thinking in the longer term, as a ex-legislator, to get those raises in the MFP permanently after we've done the work with this deficit. So I agree wholeheartedly. We do need to message that the teachers are extremely important.
Just say, I agree with you. I just want to say, and maybe I'm mistaken, but I thought last year we had $1 billion surplus, and we still didn't make it a part of the budget. So I guess that's where my, that's where my concern comes in, because we say, when we get a surplus, we had $1 billion surplus last year, it still didn't become a part. So when do we say that's going to be a permanent part of the budget?
And I agree wholeheartedly, but I will say this, just what we just talked about, reducing, the UAL and unfunded accrued liability in all of these retirement things was a priority to the legislature also. It reduced by 3% what the locals have to pay. I know there's some more coming into that from legislation last year. So all of that being said and done, it was to shore up the retirement system for the teachers and hopefully give more money to the locals. And I was disappointed, as you were, that it wasn't made permanent at the end, and that was just a whole different story we don't have time to go into. So, but I appreciate you.
Dr. Mills?
I'm glad that he lifted that up, because, I'm sorry, I'm glad that he lifted that up, because I'm not going to continue to divulge and put the nail further in the coffin, but we have been following this from beginning to end. And so, Mr. Harris, your former colleagues, it was heartbreaking to experience that, especially when we thought that we had the necessary conversations and had the understanding. And so lifting up the need for more of a partnership and more conversations to get a true, clear depiction of where the hearts and minds are with the legislators. I mean, we're always open to that. We just want to make sure that the decision that they make is going to be the decision that they made, because I will be frank with you, we were blindsided by that whole situation. It was a surprise because we thought that we had an understanding.
I'll comment to that. Many of us were, and I was also surprised that some of the legislation y'all worked hard to get through was vetoed. I mean, that was, last year was a big surprise to me on a lot of stuff. So hopefully this year we can open, that's why I say it's so important for this body, this task force to communicate with your legislators and with the governor's office. And let's try to be on the same page as we go through this process.
Dr. Procopio.
Thank you. I think there's a lot of issues out here and a lot of different options, and I really appreciate the discussion that we've had so far. Just to add to it, I am a big fan of increasing the funding formula. I think for local schools, it gives them, and also charters, more options. That said, I think every year I've said that, and I think we've only done it once this past decade. So I know I'm not particularly persuasive. Secondly, I much prefer targeted pay increases to across the board. I know, particularly when we were trying to catch up across the board, made some sense. I get it, but I prefer data-driven and the fact that we know that high schools in math and science and special education are particularly needy. That is my preferred method of trying to get pay raises. That said, I think the temporary nature of the pay increase that we have and would continue to have under some proposals, I think that really undermines the recruitment and retention part of it. I'm not sure that something is better than nothing if it's temporary, if the goal is to increase retention and recruitment. And it's not particularly fair to ask the new administration who barely got in and had to put a budget together, which is extremely difficult to do in a short period of time, and say, you really need to project out 2 years and say, okay, what could you actually afford? And in my opinion, I think a $1,000 increase that's permanent is much better than a $2,000 temporary one. And I know that's not particularly fair, but it's not really fair that you also inherited a fiscal cliff that you guys didn't create. So to that extent, it's just the best probably to go forward. So that doesn't necessarily give you any particular clarity on what I would support, because I don't know what I would support yet either. Other than those sort of general comments, I'm not a fan of temporary pay increases, especially if they're across the board. I'd rather see them permanent, but I also want formula funding increases. I can't get everything I want. So, thank you.
Dr. Bromley, let's go back to yours too. I have some questions if we can do that. Absolutely. Back on your differentiated compensation, that has been a big issue, especially when some rural districts still have not even paid that out because of the issues we have. In Jackson Parish, we gave out the highly effective. That caused a lot of motivation issues. Now, I covered over 80-something teachers, but that statute states highly effective. Now, that goes into the law with your PE teachers. That goes into your K through 3, which we hold them just as accountable. But those teachers that have those assessments, that really ruffled a lot of feathers. And if there's a way, if this is the way we go, I'd like you to try to change some of that language if you could, to give our local boards an option to either say, I don't know how to phrase it, but in a different direction to help. Because I know a few parishes around me that have not even done this because they're scared, they're losing teachers, they're going to pay an English teacher $3,000 to $5,000 more. The other English teacher is going to say, what about me? I'm here. In the small districts, it causes a lot of animosity because they talk. Now, I don't know in a bigger district how that does, but we try to be as equitable as possible to give to as many people. We already have the mentors that are paid by the state. We already have all that covered. So that was our best option that my board decided. If we can make some different language, if this is the one that we do go with, I'd like you to look at that before you present it to us, if that's possible. And then on the backside, level 4, I'm out of money to pay for dual enrollment. Over the past years, we have made it through the summer. And in our small districts, I have a lot of kids that do welding, heavy equipment with a local community college. In the past year, they jumped up on us for 3 credits, $400 and something. The local colleges, I pay $150 something for those kids going to the colleges for their 3 credits. I am delving already into my general fund budget because we're out of money. It's great for the kids. It's something we want to continue to do. But we need to fund that also. If you can find a way, if the budget the plan that we submitted does not go through, I'd like you to look at that also. to fund formulas at level 4. Because when they jumped up, and I'm not the only one, I think at a meeting we had, you heard even the larger district was that line. And I don't want to tell parents I can't take the kids, get this, do it more. Thank you.
Yes, oh,
Hi, thank you so much. Janet Pope, representing school boards and school system 69. First of all, I just want to compliment and say thank you, thank you, thank you. This is so well organized with the resolution, to the legislatures, being very specific about what we're asking for. The chart in comparison to 2022-23, all the way up to this year. Appreciate that, and Beth, I want to thank you for clarifying the state funding and the local funding, 65 and 35. So just appreciate all of the information that you have put before us today. And I won't reiterate what other people have said in other groups. I'll just say ditto, ditto, ditto. Just have a couple of questions as far as the $30 million for accelerate tutoring allocation. And if you said this already somewhere in the PowerPoint, I apologize, I don't remember it. Do we know how much we've already spent on this tutoring allocation so far?
So that's a.
And it's not an I got you question, I'm
No,
sorry.
it's a new item in the formula, so we haven't spent state dollars on this. What we've done over the last few years is we've committed a great deal of our ESSER funds, both with the state agency set aside, but then with the 90% that went to local school systems, and a lot of tutoring work has taken place. We know that that funding is going away this fall, and we also know that there's interest both from the governor's transition report, but also legislators, and also just thinking it's best practice to see more tutoring available during the day. And so what I was trying to accomplish here with that funding source is just trying to put schools in a position where they have some additional dollars that they don't presently have to be able to do that work.
Okay, and so also too, like parents can choose that outside of school, our homeschool students?
This is during the
specific?
day, so this would be block grant to school
Oh, gotcha.
systems
Okay.
so that they could use it during the day for tutoring supports. That might be, hiring personnel to support with students.
Oh, so it's
It might
not just
be-
the online?
It might be online, it would be varied options, but it's not vouchers outside of the day. This is to support in the day, and this money would be block grant out to the school systems.
Okay, appreciate that clarification, because I think that would help our school systems and our charter schools as well. Let's see. As far as the differentiated pay funding, I know Ms. Rummer had mentioned earlier when she was talking about the different weights as far as students, low socioeconomic, and also our gifted students. I think words mean something. Y'all hear me come to the table and say that a lot, because especially when we're talking about the MFP, it gets very confusing. So as far as the differentiated pay for teachers, for those of you who are new, school systems can already do this. I just want to reiterate that this, we do have consensus with our board members about local autonomy, and you've heard the superintendent say this already. Each parish, each school system is different, each charter school is different, and spending money that's closest to the child in the community or within the charter school, we definitely have consensus on that as well. But it does cause chaos in our school systems, especially like Mr. Claxton said earlier, where teachers are saying, I'm an English teacher, I'm here every single day doing whatever it takes for my students. And why is the teacher next to me getting extra money and I am not? So just wanted to put that out there, that our members do have concerns about that as well.
And I would acknowledge that that's probably true. I'm not not acknowledging the fact that it does create inequity in terms of a dollar amount paid. But if you look at, not you, if one looks at data, it clearly tells us where our vacancies are. Vacancies are not the same across the state. They are high school math, high school science, special ed, foreign language, and then they're in schools across the state that really are servicing students that are basically 85% or greater economically disadvantaged. So it's an effort where we can target additional resources to those particular areas where we know we need to slice the vacancies. You know, I heard Debbie call out some numbers, Sean call out some numbers earlier about the number of teachers. Well, those numbers are 3 years old. You know, those numbers have been cut by over 50%. Right now, we're at just over 1,000 teaching vacancies across the state. So a lot of good work by school systems to provide mentoring programs, buddy programs, instructional programs to make sure teachers have follow-up support, mentors, masters. A lot of work happening not just at the state, but locally to increase pay. And so we've been able to slice those vacancies, but we have to continue to do that. And whenever we look at the actual vacancies that exist, it's pretty clear where they are. They are in these areas. And so, you know, you have an opportunity, if it, not you, but one has an opportunity to say, look, this is the way the funding is provided to us. I'm not the one making the decision to give the math teacher more. This is the way in which it was provided to us. And you can happily like throw that on me. I've told you that privately. But I just want to point out that whenever you look at the vacancies, that's where the bulk of the vacancies are.
And thank you so much for that clarification. And again, just kudos to the organization and the way that this has been effectively communicated today. And also to putting more funding towards apprenticeships, workforce, and career and tech, because we have long been advocating for that for our students to be not only college ready, but career and workforce ready. So again, appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. Dr. Woodward?
Dr. Brumley, I mentioned this earlier, you know, pre-COVID, a lot of school districts, especially us, started to make that digital transition. COVID came along, and one of the silver linings of COVID, and I don't mean that in a mean-spirited way, but one of the silver linings was we got the ESSER dollars so that we could essentially become one-to-one. With now that the digital transition is in full deployment, has there been those deep conversations of how we're going to sustain the technology across the state? Because that's what we're talking about when we talk about this formula. It's a statewide allocation, but how can we possibly sustain the expenditures on technology? I would hate to see a regression back to the means because of all the efforts that we made to put us in a position to where we're getting close to pre-COVID numbers, and that's a credit to the department, it's a credit to the leadership, but I think it's also a credit to all of us in the field that we've made such gains. You know, moving to 42, you know, our administrators applauded when we made that announcement. So there is a great spirit out there right now, and I would hate to squash that at this time. And then we have to wait 1, 2, 3 years before we can regain it. So I think we just need to be, I understand the compromise, and you've done a great job of taking into consideration what legislators have said. And I think that's important. You're right. We've got to be able to compromise. But at some point when you represent a profession and you're in the profession and this is your livelihood, I think we all would acknowledge that we would do everything in our best interest to provide our children in the state with the best education they can possibly have. If that is the fundamental component to a thriving state is education, but yet we continue to not dismiss it, but put it on the perimeter and address so many other facets of what's going on in the state. And it's not a condemnation to any Republican, Democrat, the new governor. We're full support of what we have right now. No question. We're in full support. That's what we do. We get in the trenches, we go to work, and we are asked questions, and we come to these committee meetings, and we make it known how we, you know, truly feel, because we're in the trenches. But I go back to, are we going to allocate any funding towards technology, or are we going to go back to paper and pencil? And that's a rhetorical question. Thank you.
I have one more thing and I will shut up, I promise. Number one, Ms. Champagne, I think you were great on, if I said that correctly, your name. I think we need to meet, if not twice a year, quarterly. I think this committee needs to, and I would hope we look at the MFP twice a year, then maybe we come in and look at the changes and adjustments and we can come up with something else. And I guess since we're just talked out, if nobody else, I'd like to make a motion and get this going if we can.
I have received a lot of questions, this might be helpful as well, from teachers throughout the year about the eligibility for the stipend. So if Beth could tell us who is actually eligible for the teacher stipend?
Yeah, the stipend money was given out all in one lump sum in the fall. Guidance was published about the way in which that money could be spent. It is given to the districts to make that decision at the local level. It was given out based on positions, just like a pay raise would have been given out, but it is the local decision as to who should get that stipend. Now, the legislative intent behind that was that it be given out as broadly as possible, but the minute details of a date employed or things like that are left to the locals. We did require that they distribute all the funds by May the 1st. And some, but they did have the options to give some in the fall and some in the spring based on their own circumstances. But we do leave those, just like we do the pay raises, they have to validate who is eligible for those based on those circumstances.
Just a point of clarification, pre-K teachers were not, though, allowed. That is, that if the district chooses to do that, they have to do pre-K on their own.
Absolutely.
That's not, okay, I just want to, because I think that's where the confusion comes in at the district level, because they're teachers, but if they're pre-K, if the district wanted to pay, we had to come up with those dollars on our own.
And that is because the money was based on.
I understand.
Who was in the MFP.
I just think people hear teacher pay raises, they think I'm a teacher in a school, I'm getting the pay raise, and if the district doesn't add those dollars, it's not in the allotment that comes from the state.
Part to your motion,
I just have a point of clarification. So we keep saying teacher pay raise. Who actually receives the certified pay raise or stipend? I mean, the administrators and central office staff, they receive that as well, don't they?
Right, the definition is certificated rather than just teachers. That was determined many years ago, and that does include teachers. It includes therapists, specialists, counselors. It includes central office supervisors. It includes nurses. It's very specific to codes that are reported in the staffing database, and all those are advertised and published in the guidance every year.
Okay, one question, Ms. Whitney, the unfunded accrued liability, when does that go away?
Answer that right.
So it's a much bigger conversation. The state has made significant reforms in the pension starting back in 2009 and has put the pension debt and the payoff of it on a very positive path. So one big debt schedule will be paid off as required by the Constitution in 2029. Then another big debt schedule that was a result of the reforms in consolidating the debt will be paid off in 2040. So those are the two big schedules. Every year, you either have a gain or a loss, but the system is designed and conservative assumptions adopted, also part of pension reform, or create a system that is designed such that your gains and losses will offset going forward. But the big push is getting past that second big debt schedule, which we paid off in 2040.
Thank you. So prior to the motion, let me just say I'm more than happy to take on the MFP formula to look at this task force more than just this one time throughout the year. I know Ms. Champagne has a big appetite to look at this, and even to the point of, you told me earlier to, if we have to do and start over and look at it, and maybe that's something we can do. This board, Bessie, has 8 new members. Now's the time to look at this stuff. Now's the time to do things that hasn't been done in the past, because we're gung-ho, we're ready to do things to help you guys and to help education in Louisiana. Now, with that, I'm ready for Mr. Claxton for your motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the superintendent's MFP recommendations of the 1.375 in level 1 and the 1,500 in level 4.
So there is a motion by Mr. Claxton. Is there a second?
Can we clarify that? So you said Dr. Brumley's, no.
The one opposite.
Yeah. That's why.
You didn't want to get confused there and vote for the wrong one, did you?
I'm gonna vote.
Yeah, we do. Come on.
So we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Dr. Pope.
Oh, Dr. Pope?
Yeah.
So we do have a
Everybody
second.
else is speaking.
Any other discussion?
Can you restate the motion, please?
1.375 increase in level 1 and $1,000 in level 4 for teachers and $500 for support.
Level 4.
Do we want to now?
Yes, before we vote, I mean, I'm not saying we're voting now, but maybe another motion. But yes, we need.
Mr. Berman,
Yes.
just for clarification, we did not need to, we already have Dr. Brumley's proposal on the table, and so how is this?
No, he has not made the motion yet for his proposal.
Okay.
So right now, we're just doing this motion on the superintendent's proposal. It is
To
not
make
on-
changes to Dr. Brumley's proposal, right?
Not as
Separate motion.
separate.
Separate motion.
He hasn't made a motion yet, so if he wants to make a substitute motion before we vote on that, this would be the time to do that, or we could vote,
And
and
vote
he
it.
can make it later.
Okay.
And Matt, one more question. What's the cost on your
I think it's
proposal?
around 137, is that about right, Beth?
Probably about 140.
You know, and if they budgeted that and looked at that right, we could do that reoccurring and wouldn't have, long-term is what I'm looking at. And we've had this was 6 years now I've been on this, and we've not had this approved one.
And you're proposing this in place of what Dr. Brumley and the department are proposing?
He's asking, 70-something million, and we're up to 37, and if somebody wanted to make a motion to drop the pay raise permanently to 5,250, it would drop it to 80-something million dollars. It would be closer. But I think that wouldn't go over well.
Just vote.
And just for clarification, so with your motion, that removes the stipend? from
I don't think that has anything to do with the stipend. That's in the MFP. I don't know what the governor's plans. It looks like he's giving the stipend outside of it. Am I correct, Mr. Kay?
That's right.
Okay. This is in the MFP.
So we do have one public comment card from Mr. Michael Falk.
He had to go to a meeting.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Any other discussion on this motion? Everyone understand the motion? Okay, and we'll call the roll.
Just to clarify, we will need 13, which is a quorum of the 13 in favor for this to pass or fail. Because it's not a simple majority, it's a quorum of the total membership that has voting privileges.
I'll abstain.
Ms. Champagne?
No.
Mr. Claxton?
Yes.
Ms. Conway?
No.
Mr. Harris?
No.
Ms. Hughes?
No.
Mr. Kay? Dr. LaFar?
Yes.
Dr. Mills?
No.
Ms. Monica?
No.
Dr. Pope?
Yes.
Ms. Posey?
No.
Dr. Procopio?
Yes.
Ms. Romer?
Yes.
in favor, so the motion fails.
So the motion did fail. Okay.
Did you have another motion?
No, I'm good. Just if you could make some changes on your motion. I'll talk about those we talked about.
Michelle Bynum.
I motion that we accept the recommendation made by Dr. Bromley and LDOE to accept his formula.
Have a motion to accept Dr. Brumley's formula outlined by his presentation. Is there a second?
Clarification, is that just the MFP part? It's not about the stipend?
Yeah, that's
Just
correct.
on that one part.
All right.
I can restate, I can state it too. So that would be 25 million for differentiated compensation, 2 million for apprenticeships, 30 million for accelerated tutoring allocation, 14.3 million for mandated operational costs, for a total of 71.3 million. That's stated.
Second.
We have a second by Ms. Conaway.
Can I get clarification?
Yes, sir.
Would you be willing to change that for Bessie, the flexibility on the differentiated pay, and add a percent to the, I'm trying to figure out how to say it, level 4, like 44% or something? I need to make a substitute motion to have you change that.
I mean, I'm happy to work with you on whatever technical issue you're talking about on the differentiated.
Do we need to do it today, or is that before you go to Bessie?
Well, yeah, I think you would have to do that today because I'm not fully understanding the ask there. But I'm happy to, work with you on that if it helps in some particular way. But I don't know what you're asking for.
So let's go to the differentiated pay piece that does revise statute on the highly effective teachers. Is there a way you can take out the revised statute and let the local LEA make the decision so we have the option to either decide if it goes with the assessment piece that the teachers have to give as part of their highly effective rating, or like we use PE teachers don't give an assessment. Our K through 3, which we're on the process, I know, but they don't give an assessment. So our other teachers that give the LEAP test, the EOCs, that goes into their accountability portion.
Are you asking to be able to differentiate within the highly effective rating of
Yes.
assessed versus non-assessed?
Because when you read the statute, it doesn't give you that option to do that.
Don't do that.
So if you could do that and then look
I'll do
at
that to the extent I legally can.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So we can look at that and then level 4 at a percent to cover dual enrollment cost.
I don't have that in there, so I can't commit to that, sorry.
Can I make a substitute motion to add something to that?
Already have it set.
Okay. I'm trying to help.
You want to change the order of this motion?
Yeah, you can make it. Any other discussion on the motion at hand? Does everyone understand the motion at hand?
Can you repeat the motion?
Yes, can they repeat it, please? Because I might have a substitute.
So to approve the MFP formula as follows, to designate 25 million for differentiated compensation, to designate 2.2 million for apprenticeships and internships, 30 million for accelerate tutoring, 14.3 million for mandated operational costs, for a total of 71.3 million. Those are the changes to the formula.
That's what we are.
Michelle?
Yeah, just to ask as a point of clarification on what he said, and I think what I heard Dr. Brumley say he would be willing to do is that on that differentiation, for the highly effective, that there would be some leeway, because that is a significant issue, that teachers who have VAM scores versus teachers who have SLTs, especially at the high school level, there's some adjustments that need to be made in that. Did I hear you say that that would be something you would be willing?
Yes,
Okay.
if he wants the ability for locals within that.
To be able to?
Yes.
Okay.
That's not part of the motion.
No, I just wanted to understand.
Okay. Ms. Sherry, call roll, please.
Dr. Bromley?
Yes.
Ms. Champagne?
Yes.
Mr. Claxton?
Yes.
Ms. Conaway?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. K?
Abstain.
Dr. LaFar?
Yes.
Dr. Mills?
No.
Ms. Monica?
Yes.
Dr. Pope?
Yes.
Ms. Posey?
No.
Dr. Procopio?
Yes.
Ms. Romer?
Yes.
11. Mr. Bertrand, would you like to?
Would you like to, Dr. Bromley and Mr. Oh, did you already vote?
Yes.
It's.
Yeah. Motion failed.
Motion fails.
That was 2 noes and the motion failed?
3
Did I
noes.
count?
2 noes, 1 abstain.
Well, abstain counts as a no, yeah. Yes, because you have, there's 28 members of the council, and some of those are non-voting. So you have to have a quorum, which would be approximately 13.
Okay. Do we want to take up the resolution for the stipend? Any motion resolution?
I'll motion.
Ms. Schaumburg, a motion for the stipend resolution that's in front of you. Is there a second?
I'll make a motion.
Okay. Seconded by Mr. Claxton. Discussion? Okay. Any oppositions? One objection. Any other?
Could I hear the, yeah, I'd love to hear more about the objection.
Sure, this is on the stipend. The temporary nature of it, I just don't see the point. I would rather have leave a lower amount that is permanent. I don't think it does much, and we could put that money to paying down UAL or something else that creates a long-term benefit. That's all.
One objection? Motion carries. Any other business?
I have one question. What was the vote count on the original, Dr. Bromley?
For Mr. Claxton?
Yeah.
5 yeas, 7 nays.
No, on Dr. Bromley, the next vote we took.
It was 12 in favor, 2 noes, and 1 abstain.
So, in looking forward to another meeting, Ms. Champagne, any thoughts on that? We get together and we talk about the MFP going forward. I know it's absent with Beth. If anything happens there, we're all in a bind on this. So,
Can I make a motion?
yes.
I'd like to make a motion to take today's discussion and a copy of the minutes and simply forward that to Bessie for their consideration on the MFP.
Well, my clarification is going to be, what are the next steps? Does this automatically go to Bessie since we're just,
Yeah, they get a report, they'll get a report in March, which will be the minutes, and it will be detailed what the recommendations were and what the votes were. So they can actually see what was proposed, even though it didn't pass with the right amount, with the proper number of votes, they could still see to the extent it was supported and not supported.
so Bessie can still send it to legislation or whatever?
Yeah, you're
Just
simply
wanted to make
making
sure.
a recommendation to the board. This is a recommendation that this group is making to the board, and then the board determines what. So there's no resolution.
So, we have a motion from Dr. Brumley. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Harris. Discussion? Everyone understand the motion? Any exceptions? Hearing none, motion carries. Is there any, if there's nothing else to come before this committee, then motion to adjourn. Ms. Champagne, Ms. Carol, Roman. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here.